freedom is the answer. What's the question? Can we truly be sovereign if all of our time and attention is focused on pushing back on something that they're planning? Then we're like a ping pong ball. We're just going ping, 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 ping. So I think people struggle to actually conceive of what a free society can look like. But when you do things like join the Freedom Cell Network or come to an event like the People's Reset and hear from other folks in the UK, in other parts of the world that are actually experiencing great freedom, solid, tight-knit communities, trading largely, if not completely, like Derek Bros, outside the system, not subjected to the tax nonsense. They chose to be free and they methodically carved out a life for themselves. If you can actually see that, then it becomes more real for people. But a lot of folks are just stuck in the alternative media, in the mud, in the fear, in the negativity, and they're not able to actually vision it, because you got to be able to see it in order to create it.
This is a solutions event. This is what's happening.
After 5 successful events in North America, the Freedom Cell Network is partnering with Free Humanity to bring the People's Reset to Bath, UK.
The technocrats at the United Nations and the World Economic Forum are now hosting the Summit of the Future in New York City in September 2024.
Join us in September for the People's Reset UK, our summit for our future.
Over 3 days, we will gather in community, celebrating our victories and successes, whilst continuing to highlight solutions under 5 holistic themes.
Liberate your mind, body, and spirit.
Permaculture and food independence.
Building parallel networks.
Empowering technology.
And building free and conscious communities. 24 top-notch speakers, including Neil Oliver, Charles Dowding, Dan Astin-Gregory, Nigel Howlett, John and Rebecca Bush, and many more.
We'll also be hosting the People's Reset concert featuring international artist Dub FX, as well as Presence, 33, and more talented performers to come. Join us for the People's Reset UK. Visit thegreaterreset.org to learn more and to get your ticket today. How do we create a more free world? Today, I'm with John Bush, an activist and entrepreneur, a relentless advocate for health freedom, medical choice, and a father of 2 based in Bastrop, Texas, just outside Austin. Since 2002, he's been working tirelessly to create a more free and peaceful world through political activism and through the promotion of alternative institutions and systems. He's the CEO and founder of Brave Botanicals, an online natural health store, and the founder of Live Free Academy, a training and coaching hub, teaching individuals how to increase their freedom and prosperity with cryptocurrency, entrepreneurship, homesteading, and more. Really built around this idea of exit and building, which we'll talk about today. Not only that, John has been a co-creator with the Greater Reset events. He's going to be joining us in the UK as part of the People's Reset UK. And if that wasn't enough, in 2015, as you can see on John's t-shirt, he laid out the vision for Freedom Cells, a small mutual aid group networking with each other to achieve common goals and secure the sovereignty of its group members. The Freedom Cell Network has grown to over 30,000 people globally, maybe even more since we last took that stat, and hopes to one day replace the state as a means of social organization. So really looking forward to talking to you, John, today about your how you got into this world and the lessons you've learned over the course of your 20-year plus journey on this. And we're really excited to have you in the UK with us as part of the People's Reset, having been out myself to Morelia and spent some time with you there and the rest of the crew. I can really say hand on heart that this event is absolutely necessary right now in the UK. I mean, you're probably seeing the streets burning from your side of the pond. And, we've really got to create some change here. So let's kick it off by finding a little bit about your entry into the freedom movement, if you will. So going back as far as 2002, now well over 20 years ago, I'm curious, what was going on for you then? What was going on politically in your own life that triggered you to take action?
I think I was about 17 or 18 at the time, senior year of high school. And of course, 9/11, the September 11th attacks took place, 2001. And it just kind of shook me, but didn't really think too much of it. And then several months later in 2002, I caught a documentary by old Alex Jones, love him or hate him. He's been around for a while. And that documentary, 9/11 Road to Tyranny, was basically my red pill. And from there, I dove down into the rabbit hole of conspiracy research, exploring the effort to create a totalitarian global government, commonly known as the New World Order, and just got into activism from there. Back in the day, we used to have these like DVD towers where we duplicate DVDs, passing out DVDs on the street corner. I don't even know if people still have DVD players, but that was the early beginning, and then got into politics and all sorts of stuff. But that's essentially what woke me up, so to speak.
Yeah, for a lot of people, though, they have to feel something personally. Did you feel was there something that triggered you personally about what was going on or what you'd seen that really led you to take that action?
You know, I was always a bit of a rebel in high school, just kind of bucking authority, class clown type. In fact, we organized this group called the Student Anarchist Front. I don't even know if we knew politically what anarchism really meant at the time. This was in high school, but we were pushing back on this detention table policy where you got a little detention whenever you were even 10 seconds late, and then you had to go during lunch and sit in one of the classrooms. But I guess I was just always kind of a rebel. I know that I was upset about seeing foreign war talk on the media, but I think it was just kind of a shock to see, on the one hand, the contrast between the media just Osama bin Laden, and then we need to go respond. And then watching that documentary, seeing like, wow, all of that is a big lie. I was kind of taken aback by that. And just, I was immediately passionate about it and dedicated all of my free time towards it. As I got older and more mature, I began to despise the injustice of it all. And then, of course, the war in Iraq and seeing the innocents being killed, and then uncovering this dastardly plan that there's been deception, there's been false flag terror attacks, is just captivating and really sucked me in. And then even further down the road, as I got older, I got more involved and passionate about it, just because I started to appreciate humanity much more and see that we shouldn't be living like this. We could do so much better. And it is government and institutions that leverage government that are holding us back from really flourishing. And of course, I had kids, 11, 12 years ago. And that really is a huge motivation to take action.
Yeah, absolutely. So you started by getting out there trying to raise awareness about some of the things you'd learned, but it didn't stop there. You went into political advocacy, activism. Tell us a little bit about your journey into politics.
Sure. In college, I started learning more about the Constitution and started having a reverence for the United States Bill of Rights, which is really quite a powerful document. Of course, documents don't give us our rights. Those are inherent. But it was pretty cool to see that, back in the day, after throwing off the crown, right, the American patriots tried to protect rights from government. Of course, that was kind of a bust as we fast forward to the present moment. But just really started seeing that there's some value in that. Got involved with the American Civil Liberties Union, which is more far left nowadays. But it was actually Ron Paul's presidential campaign in 2008. For folks not familiar, Ron Paul was strict constitutionalist, libertarian, and he didn't placate. He just spoke his mind about anti-imperialism and non-interventionist foreign policy and free markets, and that, freedom is the answer. What's the question? So I got involved in his campaign, and of course he didn't win. He got totally screwed by the Republican Party. And after that, the local activists that were promoting his campaign here in Central Texas, we started a political action committee called Texans for Accountable Government. And that organization is still around to this day, but this must have been 2010, 2011 or so, maybe 2009, actually. 2009, we started it. And we actually really got involved with local and state politics. We strongly believed that we ought to ignore the federal government. It's completely corrupt at that level, but maybe we could have an impact locally and with the state government. And we were pretty good at it. We got ordinances passed. For example, in the city of Austin, they were going to train police officers as phlebotomists, meaning the police officers, if they pulled you over and suspected you of drunk driving, they would actually do a blood withdrawal there on the side of the road, or at the very least, they'd take you back to the police station and do it. And so we pushed back on that. We got an ordinance introduced. We did protests where we dressed up like vampire cops and paraded around downtown and got media coverage and stuff. And that ordinance ended up passing. Well, of course, they responded by just training nurses and having nurses positioned at the jails. There was another effort to push back on what are known as fusion centers. I'm sure they're all over the UK. Maybe they call them something different, but with the Department of Homeland Security after 9/11 being introduced, this very Orwellian Stasi-like bureaucracy, they pushed these fusion centers, which essentially merged local, state, and federal law enforcement as far as their information gathering and intelligence sharing practices. And they were monitoring protests, for example. We started visiting these fusion centers and delivering open records requests. And they were targeting libertarians and folks that had Ron Paul bumper stickers as potential militia threats. Anyway, long story short, there's a biker movement in Central Texas and an organization called the Texas Motorcycle Rights Association. And they approached me because the Department of Public Safety, that's the state police for Texas, they were pulling over these bikers and taking pictures of their insignia and their tattoos and putting it in this state database. And they knew that we were pushing back on the new fusion center in the city of Austin. Long story short, too late. We introduced a bill at the State House that would have required privacy policies for all of the fusion centers in the state of Texas. There's about 7 or 8 of them, where they couldn't collect information that was solely of a political, religious, or social view. And this actually got passed. So, we're doing well, but just like with the blood withdrawals, come to find out years later, nothing ever was done about those privacy policies. They weren't implemented. They weren't followed. There was no accountability. And years later, after there was these leaks by some anonymous group, they hacked the local Austin Fusion Center. Turns out my name was in the Fusion Center on a threat liaison officer put my name in there in this list of potential threats because we were hosting a meetup with Derek Bros about the Freedom Cell Network. And I posed the question, what if instead of filming the police when they're abusing people, people started intervening and trying to stop them from harming people? And apparently that was enough to be put on a little threat liaison list. But the point that I'm trying to make and what I want to convey to folks that are endlessly involving themselves in politics is that the whole time we thought we were having political victories. In reality, we were merely slowing the growth of tyranny. We weren't creating real freedom for ourselves. Real freedom is in the ability to live our lives according to our own values, the ability to raise children in systems that we create that aren't dependent on this beast system. And so this was one of the many things that helped me to evolve beyond politics and start taking direct action, trying to create the freedom that I wish to see in the world through my own actions, not relying on politicians to do the right thing. Because I tell you what, the government is operating exactly as it was intended to operate, which is an institution that enriches and empowers the ruling class at the expense of everyone else. So we're only spinning our wheels if we think that we're going to create a free society by engaging the political system. They're not going to give up their own power. If voting actually changed anything, it would be illegal.
John, I think, so many people will be resonating with that point, including myself. Yet the problem is, and what we witnessed and what we're witnessing right now in the UK, and perhaps you're likely witnessing the same in the US, is that anytime there's an electoral cycle, there's an election coming up, it's almost people lose sight of that and they jump straight back into the vortex of the political cycle, thinking that, their next party or leader is going to somehow clear out the old and build the new, or there's some political issue that just brings you straight back into the vortex. Is that something that you're seeing in the US as well? And, how do we kind of restrain ourselves in falling for that temptation every time?
On the one hand, practically speaking, going out and casting a ballot, it doesn't really take a whole lot of time. But like you said, people just get all worked up into a frenzy and there's this false sense of hope. And I totally can understand why, because things are so damn bad and policies get enacted that really harm people, especially when it comes to the economy, let alone all of what's going on in the UK and all the division. Of course, a lot of that is stoked and manipulated, and it's like a divide and conquer tactic, fight against each other rather than looking up and seeing who's really pulling the strings here. But I think what's important is for people to be very, very, to covet their attention because at the end of the day, it's our most valuable resource, our time and our attention, more so than money, more so than things with bells and whistles, is our time on this planet, in this plane, in this existence, in this physical realm. And I think one thing that really helps is to establish goals for oneself. A lot of people, they're like, well, I woke up and I'm red pilled, and the normies, or I don't know if you guys have that term in the UK. I don't like that term because it's kind of like a pejorative. It's like they're the other and we're better than them because we quote unquote woke up. But at the same time, oftentimes people that are awake or have been red pilled, they still get involved in the same programming and reactionary paradigm that the folks that are taking the shot and all sorts of stuff get caught up in. It's just a different paradigm. Instead of the mainstream media, they're caught up in all the alternative media, and they're still living their life in a reactionary way, meaning they're going from topic to topic, issue to issue, hot button to hot button, political issue to political issue, not in control of their own lives. So what I try to teach people with Live Free Academy is to become proactive, to identify a definite purpose that motivates you. A lot of people call it your why. What is my why? What just sparks so much joy in my life? And I feel so passionate and invigorated. You identify what that is, and then you focus your attention on that, and you come up with goals around that definite purpose. This is from Napoleon Hill. He wrote Think and Grow Rich. He said to create a definiteness of purpose. And if we don't have a definiteness of purpose, then we're going to be forever drifting, caught in a hypnotic rhythm where we never pursue our purpose. We're simply at the whims of whatever's taking our attention at that time. So to bring it back to your question, I would encourage folks, and I would encourage leaders in our movement to help folks identify goals, specifically exit and build goals, right? We can talk more about what that means, exit and build strategy. But if you don't have goals in life, if you don't have a clearly defined purpose, even coming up with a personal mission statement, for example, then it's going to be very easy for you to be taken on a ride and to become reactive and to get caught in the politics of the day. Because if you have goals, and if you got a crew and a community and you guys are building together, you have mutual goals as well, you honestly don't have time for the shit show, pardon my French, but you don't have time for all that nonsense because you're too busy kicking ass at life and doing things that bring you joy.
Yeah, I'm right with you on that. I think that's so important. I think it's a fundamental tenet, actually, of how we have to move forward here, because, the old adage of, weak times, strong. What is it? I've lost it now. I had the meme in my head, like strong times leads to weak leaders, and weak leaders create hard times, et cetera, et cetera. And what is evident within that paradigm is that those people who have a guiding, driving purpose are the ones that become strong leaders, and they're able to direct and mobilize and create ultimately. And creativity, I think, is our greatest opportunity and gift within this entire situation that we find ourselves in, because let's face it, the political paradigm isn't going to do the creating for us. So I want to just touch upon, your journey through political activism. It led to a level of disillusionment. You worked really hard. You got some victories, but ultimately left you feeling dissatisfied with the status quo. How did that period then shape a new political philosophy for you, which took you down this path of exit and build? How did things change for you at kind of philosophical level that led to you changing your approach?
Okay, so first I had a reverence for the Constitution. Didn't really have a political philosophy. Learned about libertarianism in college, and was like, oh, that makes sense. And they talked about the night watchman state, where a government's sole purpose is to enforce contracts and to protect its people from external threats. And then, of course, I learned about libertarianism, which is this philosophy centered around self-ownership and free markets and voluntary interaction amongst human beings. But there was still a lot of emphasis on let's take over the Republican Party. That was what Ron Paul was trying to push as well. And let's restore the Republic and all this stuff. But along the way, I learned of Murray Rothbard, who was a big philosophical influence on Dr. Ron Paul. Murray Rothbard was a voluntarist, right? That's actually where I learned about Samuel Edward Konkin III in this pursuit. And so there's an expression. It's like, what's the difference between a libertarian and an anarchist? And it's like 3 months of research or reading a good book on anarchism. Anyway, so this is where I was introduced to this concept of voluntarism, which is basically all human relationships and contracts and associations should be voluntary. We opt into them of our own accord. And if it's no longer serving us, we can opt out of them. Of course, that's not the relationship that individuals have with government or with the state, that institution which enjoys a geographic monopoly on the initiation of violence. That's how I define the state. And so I was studying this voluntary thing and being around this whole movement and seeing it evolve and grow. I started to see there was more and more people that were identifying as voluntarists, yet we weren't living free. We have these platitudes. Yeah, we should have voluntary interactions amongst each other, and we should build a free society, and let's debate what happens if this contract doesn't hold up here? What happens with that? And what if someone comes onto your property and you got to stop a husband from abusing his wife? What happens about property rights? And everyone's just debating till they're blue in the face. And I was like, this isn't satisfactory for me. Politics isn't satisfactory for me because we're spinning our wheels. We're investing tons of time, money, resources, energy, trying to placate. And like these politicians are placating us and we're trying to cozy up to them. I actually did enjoy playing the game of politics because we played it really well and we knew how to play the game. It is a game too. And sometimes people in our movement get offended and bothered by that. But it's like, what the hell's the point of engaging the game if you're not going to play to win, so to speak? Of course but a lot of people do that and then they sacrifice their principles. We weren't willing to do that. So maybe we didn't get very far in that game, but either way, it was empty victories. It was basically, instead of taking steps forward towards genuine freedom, a free society, we were just taking fewer steps backwards. Because every time, like I said, we got this bill passed about fusion centers, but they still collected information. In fact, the ultimate irony, they collected information on me, the guy that pushed the privacy policy. They didn't have police officers doing blood withdrawals, but they just trained the nurse to do it, and they still did it without your consent, right? We were simply just taking fewer steps backwards. So that was unsatisfactory for me. And it was also unsatisfactory that we're all just debating and philosophizing about what a free society looks like instead of going out and building it. So that's when I came to the conclusion, if we want to create freedom, we got to do the work to create it ourselves. And I think one of the things that comes up, one of the reasons I believe why this is a struggle for people is because they are looking for an easy way out. They're looking for someone else to do it for them. Also, I think a lot of people, it's a challenge for people to think outside the box. In fact, Walt Disney, when talking about thinking outside the box, he says, I don't like that phrase because there is no box. Let's pretend there is no box. But to vision into the future and conceive of a free society, a genuinely free society, that even being possible. In fact, here's another Napoleon Hill. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Right? And so a lot of people are just caught in the reactionary paradigm. And of course, the system is designed to take away our ability to think in bigger picture terms because we're so focused on making ends meet, or we're so focused all of our attention in a reactionary way against the enemy's program rather than having our own agenda and aligning with our own destiny. Can we truly be sovereign if all of our time and attention is focused on pushing back on something that they're planning? Then we're like a ping pong ball. We're just going ping, 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 ping. So I think people struggle to actually conceive of what a free society can look like. But when you do things like join the Freedom Cell Network or come to an event like the People's Reset and hear from other folks in the UK, in other parts of the world that are actually experiencing great freedom, solid, tight-knit communities, trading largely, if not completely, like Derek Bros, outside the system, not subjected to the tax nonsense. They chose to be free and they methodically carved out a life for themselves. If you can actually see that, then it becomes more real for people. But a lot of folks are just stuck in the alternative media, in the mud, in the fear, in the negativity. and they're not able to actually vision it, because you got to be able to see it in order to create it. So those are a bit of the struggles. And then strategically just came to realize, if we actually do want to create this free society, it's time that we start building it now. That's what this whole exit and build thing is all about.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I became so passionate about bringing the People's Reset to the UK, because for the first time in 4 years, having been heavily involved in the political activism side myself, particularly around the COVID issues and related issues around the medical freedom, we'd gone over old ground over and over again to try and make sense of what just happened, from every level, politically, psychologically, community level, societal challenges, trying to make sense of, the specific harms that have been created by certain products. And it was conference after conference where we'd start to build alliances of people who are challenging and pushing back exactly what you just described. And it really did feel like ping pong. I mean, it was like a pinball machine at times. There was like one issue after the other, and we kept talking about like the whack-a-mole concept. It's like we whack that one down, and then the next one comes up, we have to whack the next one down. And it's just, we constantly just our attention torn between these issues that are constantly popping up. And it's still happening now, quite frankly. In the last week here in the Britain, there's significant attacks on our freedom of speech. I don't want to go into the whole riots part of this conversation. I'm going to do an episode on that as part of this week's content. But our freedoms are under attack in this kind of post-COVID world. So again, that kind of ping pong nature is playing out, and people are drawn into it. I'm drawn into it. But what I got from going to Mexico and attending and being part of the Greater Reset was to me, it was just like this is exactly what we need right now, because it's the next stage. You understand the problems that we're facing, but exactly what you're talking about, we need to have a vision of tomorrow. We need a better story for our future, because everything is doom, gloom. The world is ending. Kids growing up today are being taught that, the planet is going to die. And we have all of these things that are just infusing into our psychology. Yet in order for things to change, we have to change it. We have to change our map of the world. We have to change our view of the world. And plugging into the events in Morelia just opened my eyes to so much that was happening. And I was just blown away by how many communities were freely trading amongst each other, and the smart technologies they built to enable that. It was, and I use the word smart. I mean smart in terms of clever. People are going to say smart tech. Smart cities. I know. I meant clever, intelligence. Innovative ways to trade, and a whole range of things. I was like, this is and the level of advancement around people's steps into reclaiming their own health, so they don't become dependent on the pharmaceutical system or the medical system. So I saw this entire world just appear in front of me, and I thought, wow, the Central America, South America, even parts of North America, so much further ahead than we are in the UK. I thought we have to bring this event to the UK. We have to start to really imagine how we move forward from here, which is why I'm so excited that you're coming as well as part of this project to build on what we're talking about here. But I want to kind of bring it back to the exit and build philosophy or strategy, really. You've given an indication of the philosophy around it and the kind of what it's built upon. What does it mean practically to you? What does exit and build mean in practical terms?
Sure. Exit and build is a strategy to bring about a more free society. That's when we work together on exit and build goals. It's also an individual strategy or family strategy, and people can use in order to create greater freedom, prosperity, community in their lives. And the idea is, rather than banging our head against the wall, hoping for politicians to do the right thing. Sorry, I just kind of chuckle at the politicians are going to save us. They're going to do the right thing. And we got this one guy, and, we agree with them on maybe 30, 40, 50%. And then the other parts, he's just a total moron. Anyway, sorry.
But I get it, John, because at the minute, the incumbent leaders, they're so drowning in this other philosophy, this other way of life. So it's almost like people are seeing, even if you get a step change, it's some level of change. But I think people get caught up in this idea of this white hat, this savior coming to change it all and cleanse out the system. History would indicate that rarely, if ever, actually occurs, and that real change comes from the grassroots. It comes from people that see the world differently.
Yeah, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So even the good guys tend to you think you're going to go in and change the system, but the system changes you more than you change the system. And if we do only rely on politics, there can be a hybrid, right? But I feel like it's better if more people focus all of their attention on exiting and building, creating the alternatives. Because if we don't, then we're going to get caught in this, think about a revolution, political revolution. The root of the word is revolve. So even if we do make incremental improvements in government, which the tide, of course, is strongly the other way, government getting worse. It's rarely ever getting better in any political jurisdiction, really. And even when it is, it's a facade, it's false, it's passing from some hard left communism style to this more right authoritarianism style, which is what's happening in the US right now. But you just end up in this revolution of cycles, never creating the opportunity to advance the ball down the field and actually future generations experience greater freedom, which is another reason why this is kind of hard for people to conceptualize, because to truly create a free society is an intergenerational effort. And of course, the enemies of freedom, the predator class, the parasite class, New World Order, Great Reset, these clowns, the World Economic Forum, they most definitely are looking intergenerationally. The secret society roundtable groups, that's their whole play. But we're caught on the election of the day, the topic of the day. So it's no wonder that they're advancing their team down the field at a much faster rate, because everybody's just caught in the politics of the day when they have these big picture grand visions, which is what we're trying to put forward with the People's Reset. But back to the exit and build strategy, just to sum it up, it involves exiting those institutions, those systems that we disagree with, that we find to be unethical, that we find to be no longer serving our needs, or maybe they never served our needs. We exit those systems and we build new ones. So, for example, we exit the reliance on the banks and we trade with alternative currencies. Maybe it's Monero, maybe it's silver coins, maybe it's a barter system. We exit reliance on the mainstream healthcare systems and we use alternative modalities. Exit schools and homeschool, if that's even allowed in the UK. I'm not sure if it is. Exit using big tech and use decentralized platforms, right? Exit YouTube and use Odyssey, or still try to puncture, puncture the mainstream consciousness by using those platforms, but then let's build and proliferate the other ones, right? And exit decision-making through government and create decentralized, consensus-based decision-making mechanisms through communities like the Freedom Cell Network. And then now there's a thing I came to realize too, because I'm a younger guy, I have assets and a mortgage and kids and stuff. So I'm a little bit less risk averse than I was. And then there's other folks that are more established. And they're like, sure, sounds great, John, but I'm retired and we're eking by. I don't want to be some rebel and exit the system. And now all of a sudden I can't pay for my healthcare needs, right? So here's how you flip it too. We build the alternatives so as to create a graceful transition for the exit. Now, some people like Derek have already exited almost completely, right? He's not in the banking system. He's not tied to any taxing schemes. He's living relatively free, right? But he doesn't have a mortgage. He doesn't have kiddos, right? And he's like really leading by example. And I give him so much kudos for that, right? But there's other folks like I was sharing that are more established. So we start to build these alternatives. We start to build out the trade systems. We start to take proactive measures within our own life to identify places we could buy food using alternative currencies, alternative healthcare practitioners that we can trade with. We can start to slowly but surely ease our way outside of the system, because I got news for folks that are listening. We may be faced with some difficult choices where we have to exit immediately, or else we're going to be faced with the prospect of taking a shot or being put into some box where we're forced to limit our carbon output. And like this, some weird eco regime is inflicted upon us. Central bank digital currencies are coming. So it's really contingent upon our freedom movement that we start to exit and build now, whether you fully exit in the next couple of years or so, or you just start laying the groundwork so as to ease the transition for the day when we do exit. And again, we don't have to come at this in a reactionary way, although we should be aware of creating defensive capabilities for ourselves to defend against all this nonsense coming down the pike, to opt out of it. But more importantly, proactively and aligning with what this is all about. This is how we ought to be living in the first place. We ought to be living through voluntary institutions, through decentralized mechanisms, through transparent systems where we can hold one another accountable, where if somebody does become a leader or in a position of some authority, we can see what they're doing. We can push them out if they become corrupt. That's not what the status quo is. And it's a big mission, right? And it's going to take some time, but the more people that hop on board, the more likely it is for success.
Yeah. John, why is it you think we're not living in that way? I've really started to study, the kind of history of political thought and political philosophy, and looking more broadly at the kind of history of how societies organize themselves to try and find specific examples of where we've lived in more decentralized, community-led times. And there are plenty of examples in history. In fact, when you look outside some of the main political philosophies, the Rousseaus and the Hobbes, and you look into other realms that have been written from other cultures, you can actually find these types of community organizations, or community organization structures and decentralized approaches. But right now we're facing global centralization. It's no longer, at the state level. It's now global centralization with impositions upon our kind of livelihoods and our day-to-day living, potentially, unless we take the approach that you're advocating for as we exit and build. But what do you think the barriers are, and what's led to this point where we found ourselves in this highly centralized, authoritarian type of system?
There's this great essay. To be more philosophical, there's this great essay by Murray Rothbard called Left, Right, and the Prospects for Liberty. And he examines political evolution in Western Europe, specifically moving away from monarchy towards democracy, so to speak. And he actually pointed out that, this concept of left and right actually came from the French Parliament around the time of the French Revolution. And it's on the right sat the conservatives wanting to conserve the authority of the crown. And on the left sat the radicals wanting to overthrow the crown, right? And for the longest time, through John Locke and other thinkers, this concept of the classical liberalism began to emerge. Mobility, freer markets, moving away from strict mercantilism, and just the nobles having power and rights and privileges, and that spreading to the masses. And it was classical liberalism in the beginning, which was a relaxation of constraints, controls, government edicts, right? But along the way, in large part thanks to Karl Marx, that left position, which was classical liberal, which is what libertarianism is rooted in. It's like classical liberalism and then libertarianism, and then voluntarism is the consistent philosophy of liberty. It kind of got co-opted by socialism. And it became where the ends were mobility, a higher living standard for the masses, greater freedom, trade, right? That was the ends. And the means were, well, let's relax, let's get government off our backs, give people more ability to trade, more property rights, and then we can achieve those ends. But then socialism came in. It was like, no, we need government to help us achieve those ends. And this whole beautiful evolution got perverted. So that's one piece of it. Secondly, I think a lot of people have just grown to be dependent on those institutions of government, mega corporations, large centralization, big tech, for example. And it's a challenge to break free of that. And then when you have an economic reality where the economy is completely controlled and built on a totally fraudulent house of cards with constant inflation and government spending, it makes it more challenging for people to live. And so it's something that I've come to realize with Live Free Academy. We sell events, workshops, we do all sorts of activity. We're very keen on our marketing. Just a lot of people, they see what we're talking about and they're passionate about it, but then they're like, I hear you, but I still got to make ends meet. I still want to send my kid to college, and I still got to worry about retirement, right? So until we can start thinking big picture, for example, there's a lot of older folks in our community, and they're like, well, what about my Social Security? Like, we literally need to think on the level of how do we create social safety nets that are voluntary for our freedom community? Because we do have elderly folks that are going to need some support that may not be able to make it on their own, nursing homes, all sorts of stuff, right? So it's up to each and every one of us to think bigger and to start thinking in terms of how can we create systems and institutions that can help the transition. So it's not just speculating about what a free world could be like, but we're actually like, no, I totally understand the worry that you're coming from, and you don't want to let go of that entitlement program that you've grown dependent on. But hey, I got news for you. We're actually creating a decentralized autonomous organization, or there's a crypto-based thing, or we actually just bought some land and we have an intentional community, and there's an area where we're really taking care of the older folks because we notice that we know they have wisdom to gain. We have wisdom to be gained from them, and we're going to take care of them, and there's medical support, blah, 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 blah. So it's just that a lot of people are dependent on those systems, and it's up to each and every one of us to set aside the time and energy and the resources to build those alternatives so as to attract folks to break free of it.
Yeah, could you introduce the Freedom Cell Network and what role that plays then in kind of mobilizing such a vision? Because, this is really grounded in small groups of people, locally orientated, not just in, many people in the UK would have taken part in Freedom Cells during the COVID, but it acted as a form of resistance. But now we're really in the building phase. So how firstly, for those who aren't familiar with the Freedom Cell Network, could you outline, give it a basic introduction to what it is and what the concept is designed to achieve?
Sure. Yeah. So anyone can join, and there's like over 40,000 participants globally. People can join at freedomcells.org. And, essentially, as I was sharing back in the day, I started learning about voluntarism, and I recognized there's a lot of people that aren't living free, even though we know that we ought to be living free. And I was like, what is it? What's holding us back from living free? And well, a lot of it is fear. The government's going to come get us if we don't follow their rules. And I came to recognize, like, well, what's really missing is strength in numbers. Everyone's starting to wake up here and there, but we feel alone, like we could get crushed. But if we all organize together and we get on the same page and we work together with mutual goals and ideas, then we really become a force to be reckoned with. We can actually bring about some societal change. And so I started kicking this idea around in my head. And at the same time, I was seeing these different organizations that were using small group organizing. And so essentially what the Freedom Cell Network is it's a decentralized group of freedom lovers that recognize there's a problem going on in the world, but they're focused entirely on the solution, on exiting and building. And it's organized in a very decentralized, non-hierarchical, horizontal fashion, right? So some organizations are organized vertically, the government, corporations with the board of directors and the executives and the employees, right? But we organize the Freedom Cell Network horizontally. So it just works like this. You find a small group of people in your very local area, right down the street, across town, and you guys start working together on common exit and build goals. We're going to make sure everyone in our little group has a garden in their backyard. And that's our goal for the next 3 months. We're going to show up to each other's houses. Maybe we invite a gardener that's a master gardener. Maybe one of us is really keen on it, so he's going to spread the knowledge to the other folks. We like to organize in approximately groups of 8. 8 is the optimal number of people for maximum creativity. That's what we're doing. We're building, we're creating. It doesn't have to be 8, though. It could be whatever you want. But the idea is to get a small group of people together. Now, that in itself is really transformative for a lot of folks that have just been going it alone or spending all their time on their computer. We're talking about getting together in real life, working on exit and build goals. We take it a step further from there. You get your group of 8, and then you start to organize other groups of 8. And before you know it, you have several groups of 8. And that's what forms a larger group. So we call the core group, the smaller group, inner cadre. And then you go find other people in your area across town, and they have their groups. This becomes the middle cadre. And then before you know it, this larger group connects with the folks on the other side of the UK or our friends up in Ireland. And that's what we call a meta cadre. And it's this self-replicating system, human organism, where we can actually create some pretty solid infrastructure to begin to replace government and mega corporations when it comes to fulfilling our common wants and needs. And just to drive it home, here in Central Texas, for example, there's a Central Texas Freedom Cell Network. When I say Central Texas, I mean the city of Austin and the surrounding counties and the surrounding cities and towns. I was born and raised in Austin. We're now in Bastrop, which is just east in a rural area. We have a 10-acre homestead. And so in Central Texas, there's like 700 people on our Telegram group. Now, mind you, not all 700 show up. Some are what I call lurkers. But that's the Central Texas meta cadre. But then there's a Bastrop, Fayette County middle cadre. That's where we are. There's like 170 people. We just had a meetup there, but good 15, 20 people showed up. And then there's a South Austin group, downtown Austin, Hayes County, which is just south, Hill Country, which is west, Far Hill Country, which is further west, Williamson County. Each one of those groups is what we call a middle cadre group. And then finally, within those groups, there's the smaller groups that get together more regularly. So we have our own little crew that centers around our property and a handful of other people. And the idea is this mechanism is very difficult to corrupt because it's not one central authority. It's not one powerful group that governs them all. It's completely decentralized. And within this framework of organizing human beings, we can create what's called organized effort, this is another Napoleon Hill. I'm obsessed with Napoleon Hill and success philosophy. But when you have this many people and you can get on the same page through organized effort, you can really have an impact not only on the lives of the individuals that are involved, but hopefully we can kind of be like a beacon and we can show the rest of the world, hey, there's another way to live. There's another way to organize ourselves. There's another way to reach mutual decisions together and to engage into organized effort. It doesn't involve violence. It doesn't involve coercion. It doesn't involve inflating the money supply. We don't have to deceive or manipulate anyone in order to get people on board. This is what it's all about. We hope that you'll come give it a try. And again, anyone can join freedomcells.org. You can go add yourself to a map. There's actually a member map. Don't put your home address. Maybe put the pub down the street or the coffee shop down the road that maybe y'all could meet up at. And you may find that there's a handful of people in your area already that are looking to meet up. And if there isn't, or if maybe there was a couple years ago, but they're no longer active, then we're relying on you to play an active role in starting a meetup and finding new people and helping to get organized.
Do you find that the cell is kind of special? You mentioned a group ensuring that everyone has a community garden set up or a personal garden so they can grow food. Do you find that you get certain groups that specialize in natural health and their mission is to go and do work to help people with their natural health in the area, or do you find they're more general? And is there a kind of guiding rule around how these are set up?
Yeah, so there are groups that specialize, so to speak, or that are more inclined towards specific pieces. Of course, the gardening and food production and food provision is one of the most important things, right? There's things that more people focus on because they're more necessary for living. But, it could become more and more organized where you have spread out across a region, this group, it takes a leader to come in and say, I want to help organize and take a leadership role into maximizing the effectiveness of what it is that we're doing here. And a lot of anarchists and freedom people, they like balk at follower leader, but it's a natural thing that arises. And unfortunately, and it's not unfortunate or unfortunate. There's just a ton of people that aren't taking the initiative. That's another thing I try to do. I try to cultivate that within people because we never really learned how to get shit done or how to lead a project or lead a team, for example. But to really take things to the next level, you could have working groups or you could organize single issue cells. So if you're a core cell, that's like, those are my folks. They got my back. We work on a variety of different things throughout the year. But then to take things a step further, somebody could initiate so they could host a meeting. Let's say you got 20, 30 people and you're like, what are the most important things we need? Well, one of the things with chaos and riots going on, we need security. We want to make sure we don't get caught up in all this craziness going on. And of course, food is really important. And we're a little bit concerned about the food supply and the supply chain. And then what else? Well, we want to get the kids together because ultimately, to take things to a big picture vision, we need to raise the kids in a manner that's in alignment with our values and get them to know each other and build relationships. And, as you well know, it's a challenge raising kids. It'd be great to have a supportive network of other parents that we can lean on for advice or to to babysit so we can go out with the missus. But you can then create these working groups, and then the working groups take lead on executing and developing these plans. And so there are some freedom cell groups throughout the country and the world that are more organized. A lot of groups are just getting together, and really at the end of the day, just getting together and having a group of people that has your back, that's focused on solutions, not down in the mud and the reactionary paradigm. The fear paradigm is beneficial in itself. But if we are to create the free society that we all desire, it is going to take that next level of organized effort to pull it off.
Yeah, I mean, I can really see how this methodology can work, particularly, if we just take the 5 themes that we're working on with the People's Reset, you've got your liberate your mind, body, soul, which is really about, your health, your well-being, your mental health, your emotional health, your spiritual health. And if you're working on that locally, you're working together to improve your health. And then, we're looking at food independence, permaculture. You've touched upon that, alternative technology, decentralized tech, helping to, distribute these tools to help people unplug from big tech, parallel systems. And again, on a localized level, using creativity and ingenuity to really look at how we can reimagine localized healthcare, how we reimagine the economic environment, the business environment, how we trade. You could really see how these organic structures start to emerge, and it's kind of prototyping new ways of living in a way that people can learn from. And what's brilliant about the kind of way they interconnect with the different cells is that rather than saying one size fits all, because this worked here, we're all going to do it, you can actually model it. You can say, well, it's fascinating that you guys are doing that. We're going to give that a try, but you do it and it might work out slightly differently where you are. It enables you to have that distinct autonomy, localized effort that can be agile to your own unique circumstances. What are the risks, however, John, that this would eventually, in the name of efficiency, become what it's fighting against? Particularly within the kind of realm of the human condition that you outlined. Not everyone is necessarily an initiator. And actually, I've done quite a lot of work myself on exploring different personality types. And it's almost like the initiators, the leaders, are the ones that are kind of revered in society. Yet the other personality types that are more implementation orientated or more orientated to harmonization, maintaining a sense of culture or value, they each play a different role. So I think, the implementers are often what a creative needs. I've worked with so many visionaries that actually needs to surround themselves by implementer types in order for their vision to be materialized. So how do you avoid the problems that could emerge as a result of that, where people start to say, well, why don't we all do this the same way, and this person becomes the leader of this thing? How do you prevent? And is it a problem if it does emerge like that? If new institutions arise from this that start to grow grassroots from these types of cells, is that necessarily a problem? I'm curious to explore your thoughts around that.
Sure. Well, on the one hand, I think as long as things remain voluntary and people aren't coerced into participating in a particular cell, there is a mechanism of correction in place, which is absent in government, in that if things are going south or they're no longer in alignment with your values or what it is that you need or expect from this organization, then you can decouple yourself from it. And the beauty of this horizontal honeycomb structure, so to speak, is that you can maintain the cohesiveness of the overall body or the overall idea or network, even if you break away from this one piece, right? So let's say we're in Bastrop County and we have the middle cadre. There's like 172 people. Again, not everybody shows up, but those are people that have raised their hand and say, I like this idea and I want to be involved. So there's 172 people. And then within that group, there's a bunch of smaller groups spread out throughout this rural area. Well, let's say that you have regular meetups once a month. We're getting together. We don't do ours once a month. We just had one a couple days ago. We have another one coming up. So we're doing 2, but we hadn't done any in the past couple months before that. But let's say that there's a regular meetup, and at those meetups, we share news and updates and what's working, and maybe there's a topic that we lean in on, and it's, we got a drought here in Texas. What are you guys doing to make sure your gardens are okay? Whatever it may be. But there's this guy that always shows up that's like really aggressive, or he's aggressive towards women. And we have our places at a restaurant or whatever, and some people are drinking. A lot of people aren't drinking, but maybe he gets really drunk, whatever. So it'll be easier. And that person, that individual, everybody's got to belong to one of these cadres. You don't have to, of course. People just show up. But if we were to be organized, the idea is like you got your tight-knit cadre. So one thing that could happen is there's this mechanism of redress and correction in place where some people could go talk to this guy. But more importantly, you could encourage the local cell, his little inner cadre group, to talk to him. And if things get so bad, it's the responsibility of that group to be like, hey, you're part of our crew, and this is reflecting poorly on all of us. What can we do to help you? It seems like you got a bit of a drinking problem. We've struggled with that. Maybe we get together. We could try some alternatives. We could have a cup of tea, for example, if we're over in the UK, right? And so that helps. But then ultimately, if the person isn't willing to correct his behavior, then the larger group could say, well, either you guys excommunicate him from your little group, or we're going to excommunicate your entire little group. Now the people are like, well, we really got to get this guy in check, or we got to break away from him if we don't want to lose the benefits of the group as a whole. Same thing if someone's authoritarian, because this plays out in Telegram. Of course, a lot of this is taking place online still. And me and Derek are always trying to spur people like, this isn't an online thing. You don't need to take these Telegram groups so damn seriously. What really matters is who's getting together in person, showing up for one another. But there's all these little fiefdoms that show up on Telegram, and this one guy's real authoritarian, or they're just pushing Trump stuff. And it's like, well, if you want to be part of the Freedom Cell Network, it's known that we're apolitical. We don't get involved in politics. It doesn't mean that you can't get involved in politics in your own life. But if you're going to have a group, that's the Freedom Cell Network, and you want to be part of the broader thing, then it's not a political space. And so if someone just is like, no, this is how we're doing it, or someone gets all racist against a particular group or whatever, then so too can someone just say, well, I'm going to just form another group for our area. And then now there's choice, competition. This is something that's absent within government, which forces you to participate no matter if you like it or not. And the only mechanism that you have is to try to vote someone into office. But we all know how fruitless that's been. And of course, the elections can be rigged. So there's two ways that this decentralized horizontal structure can help to ensure accountability. One, you can excommunicate. Then you have the added pressure of excommunicating the group if they still remain associated with the bad actor. Two, you always can just create and spin up another group. And just the same, so say you have the bad actor here, and then here's the rest of the group. You can just kind of push him out or push that group out and then form another group. So ultimately, we don't know how this is going to pan out, but I do think it's a worthwhile opportunity to experiment with alternatives, because the status quo is unacceptable. And who knows if this turns into its own little tyranny? I doubt that it will. There's ideas in place to avoid that. Yes. But ultimately, we owe it to ourselves to try.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it's predicated on the idea of self-responsibility and self-organization. And, it's really interesting that you chose to use the example of kind of corrective behavior, because, obviously these riots have been taking the headlines in the United Kingdom. And, I've seen some of the reporting from independent journalists who've gone out there and, tried to make sense of what was happening. Interestingly, the mainstream media have been largely absent from the ground itself. So the stories you're reading aren't actually informed by what's actually happening on, surprise, surprise. But there have been real examples of criminal damage, by community members from within their community. It's not all, controlled opposition and, infiltration to try and create a narrative. And you witness all these people in the community kind of staring on in horror at what they're witnessing, but no one is stepping in. The police aren't stepping in. So we've got this situation where there's no community accountability. So what you've described is actually that sense of self-responsibility, which ultimately I think is necessary. The moment that guy takes a bat to a car and then takes it to the next one and everyone's watching, understandably, you're probably worried about your own safety. He's got a baseball bat in his hand and he's not afraid of smashing a car window in. Mm-hmm. But there's enough of you around to demobilize him. And, you know, that's complicated. I get it. But actually, we're talking here about behavioral issues within a community setting and actually taking responsibility. And this is all about responsibility, because if we really want change to happen without always delegating that authority to someone else, the police service or the government or any other institution, then we have to be willing to do the hard work. We have to be willing to make courageous decisions. And I think I view that to be the biggest obstacle, is that, as you outlined earlier on in this conversation, is that a lot of people want it to be done for them. And that's become a mentality, a pervasive mentality that has created the possibility for this enslavement, this idea of masters and rulers over people, because the conditions have been set for that. So in order for that to change, and we have to lead it, we can't wait for other people to do this. We have to all participate, and that's scary. But nothing great was ever done without overcoming those fears in order to get us into action. Courage is really the first starting block. So I'd kind of like to wrap up by there's a couple of things I'd like to just close out with, but, building that sense of mental resilience that it takes to overcome challenges and interpersonal challenges. That's the hardest part, really, is relating with others that see the world differently. What's been, in your experience, some of the most important tips for taking on that personal responsibility and overcoming those fears that may naturally arise?
One core thing is for folks to get real conscious and mindful about where they point their attention. So, of course, where your attention goes, energy flows, is the old adage. And one perfect example is if folks are just spending all their time, or a significant amount of their time, watching Rumble videos of chaos and the New World Order and all sorts of dastardly things taking place in the world, then that's going to be their world. Case in point, we have this migrant stuff going on in the U.S. as well. Now, of course, we have a gigantic landmass of a country, so it's less noticeable. I live out in the country too. If you live in the country, it's a different lifestyle than being in the city anywhere in the world. You're a lot more insulated from a lot of the craziness and the nonsense. That's why I'm a huge proponent of exiting the cities, buying land and building community in the country. I know land may be a little harder to come by there in the UK, but you get enough people to pull their resources together and you can get yourself a little plot out in the country, or at least buy some, little townhome or whatever it may be in the country. I just strongly believe that, if you want to exit a lot of the chaos, go out to the country. But a lot of people, case in point, we got this migrant thing, and there's somebody close to me, and they spend a lot of their time on InfoWars and just watching all this media and the invasion and the chaos and right. But then me, I don't spend my time doing that. I spend my time on my business with the kids, trying to lead my life according to my goals. And there's this shopping center in Austin, Texas. And I've been to the shopping center a couple times and more recently. And this person close to me has been there quite a bit. And he's making commentary about how many South American and Latin American people are at this shopping center. And you could tell they probably snuck in the border. And I'm like, I don't know what the heck you're talking about, because I don't even see it. I just see happy people and families. And I didn't even notice there was more folks that look like they're from South America. And if I did notice those individual families, I'd probably like, oh, what a cute kid. They look happy. I hope they're having a good day shopping, So it's just like what we focus on. And if we're focused on division, if we're focused on they're part of the other group, and I'm part of this group or this race or this philosophy, then it's going to be a lot easier for us to get caught into that reactionary paradigm. So I just encourage people to be really choosy with what you focus on. And just to reiterate what I shared before, when you can have a clearly defined purpose and you can just laser focus on that purpose, you become like a horse with blinders on. You're not distracted by what's going on over here and over there. Now, of course, I know it's easy for me to say, I live here in Bastrop County. There's literally riots taking place on the street. But what's going to help that situation? To focus more of your energy on it, to get all pissed off about what's happening, or like you shared, and the Freedom Cell Network would be a great mechanism of accountability. And beyond putting your hands on someone to physically stop them, a lot of times within communities, especially indigenous communities, the biggest deterrent to bad behavior was being pushed out of the civil tribe, the civil society. So if imagine a civil society, but it has a freedom cell network structure overlaid on top of it. And there was a good handful, 5, 6 people. We saw what you were doing the other night, man. We don't want this chaos in our community. And so I don't know what kind of system you have systems in place, 2 strikes or whatever. Anyway, or you're just like, we don't want to associate with somebody that's going to be smashing property. That's not how we go about solving our problems in spite of what's going on in our country. So we're not going to allow you to come to our meetings anymore. We're not going to allow you to work on the garden in the backyard. That kind of thing is going to be a big deterrent for behavior as well. So just encourage people to be resilient, be good to one another also, and understand too, more often than not, conflict we have with other human beings is a projection of our own shadow. So if we do really want to have better human relationships with other people, it's up to us to have a better relationship with ourselves and to recognize that which triggers us. It's some deeper rooted thing that's coming up for us, to use mindfulness to explore that type of stuff, to be kind and gentle with ourselves, and that'll radiate outward to our friends and our family and our community.
John, before we wrap up with some of the things that you're working on and where people can go to find out more about your projects, it'd be remiss of me not to give the opportunity for you to share a little bit about what we've got coming up at the People's Reset. You know, you've been heavily involved in co-creating the Greater Reset events since 2021. And, you know, you've experienced not only firsthand in creating these events, but seeing the impact. So could you give us kind of a highlight of what people can expect with the People's Reset UK?
Yeah, so these events are super powerful because they offer an opportunity to accelerate transformation, right? Oftentimes we get caught in our own little echo chamber. We get caught in our own hypnotic rhythm. Life is hard. We're struggling to make ends meet. We have our own drama going on, let alone the drama going on across the country and in the media. And we get caught just in the monotony of life. But you go to one of these events, and of course, you know, I host online webinars and summits and all this stuff, but there's something really special about being there in person. The speakers are super inspirational because they're saying, hey, just as you were inspired by seeing how built out the alternative currency networks are in Mexico, and there's all sorts of different ones, and there's some that are bigger, and people are trading across cities with alternative currencies that aren't even based on cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is easy at this point, but they have physical notes that they're trading. You're like, wow, look, if they're able to do that there, I don't see any reason why we can't do it here. All right. So that's hugely powerful. Secondly, for folks that are feeling alone or feeling downtrodden or feeling despair, to go out and mix it up with other people that not only have similar political philosophies and values as you do, but more importantly, they are either actively or they're willing to go get their hands dirty and start building on their own. There's something very special. The relationships that are forged, the networking that takes place, and the empowerment that you'll get out of something like this, I think, is extremely worthwhile. And I know sometimes, you know, with the way the economy's going, it's people struggle with the tickets, and it's hard to make ends meet already, let alone planning a trip, and I got to get a hotel or whatever it may be. I just want to encourage people to look at something like this not as an expense. It's not that you're losing some money, but in all reality, you're gaining a whole lot of knowledge. You're gaining a whole lot of community, and you're gaining that inspiration. So I would encourage people to see it as an investment. And the sheer momentum that you'll get out of it will be well worth the expense, because it's going to only pay itself back in enormous dividends by the relationships that you build, the ideas that you get. And then when you bring that back home, you're going to find yourself really, really empowered to take action. And I promise you, I guarantee it's going to be night and day. The person that the person that showed up to the event, whenever you leave, you're a radically different person, a much better person, much more positive, and much more inspired to take action.
Yes, that I can be assured of. You know, it
happened with Dan.
Happened with myself. Yes, experienced it. So, and yourself and Rebecca are both going to be there.
Yeah, we're really excited to come and share what we've been working on lately.
Amazing. Well, let's close out on that. So what are some of the things that you've got going on at the minute that you can point people towards that you've got active? I know you've got some webinars live. You've got accelerators coming up. You can tell us a little bit about some of the things that are going on in your ecosystem.
Sure. So, I've always been exploring this exit and build thing and, creating counter economies and agorism. Agorism is another strategy that is the foundation of what we do with the Greater Reset, People's Reset, the Freedom Cell Network. And it's this idea that we should trade outside the system, under the table, outside of the watchful eye of the man. But I came to realize okay, well, that's easy to do on a small scale. But what if we wanted to expand that and grow that? And for example, Rebecca and I were we have a 10-acre homestead. We have 2 community members. A third's actually moving out this Friday. We're excited about that. So we have a little mini intentional community, but we have aspirations and plans to build a larger scale 100 acres, 200 acres, 100 different members on there. And we were trying to figure out how to do that using old system methodologies like a limited partner, general partner, LLCs, all this stuff. And it just wasn't working because we're trying to create a free society here. Well, we discovered this concept of the private realm centered around private membership associations, really. And a lot of this is old school and it has roots in common law, which, of course, in Great Britain, there's a lot of that stuff as well. And I discovered this concept of the Trinity. And it's this idea where you can create outside the system by using a private membership association, a non-statutory trust, and then by creating a church, or in the United States, a 508c1a, which is a tax exception to the income tax, right? And a lot of folks across the pond or wherever in the world, they're like, oh, well, we don't have that specific part of the code that if we create a church, we don't have to pay taxes. But there's folks that are in Costa Rica, for example, and they have it based in the U.S. There's all sorts of great strategies around types of stuff. But either way, this strategy is called the Trinity. And there's this great guy named Bradley Logan that's a divine law specialist. And so we've been exploring that. I was originally hesitant at this whole world, but through the private membership association concept, I saw that we can have a means of organizing, we can have a means of delivering goods and services that's entirely outside the system. And this enables people through the non-statutory trust to hold title to land or other assets and to protect those from external threats. And then through the private membership association, it enables people to freely associate with one another under guidelines and their own rules. And of course, through having a church, you can do God's work on this planet, and there's benefits that come with that. And I've really been exploring how this private membership association especially can serve as another foundational piece of what we're doing with the Freedom Cell Network. I'll be sharing this at the People's Reset. I think I'm talking on Community Day. But if folks want to dive deeper, we put together a free webinar where we explain this whole concept, how it applies, how it can be applied anywhere in the world. And folks can sign up for that for free at livefree.academy/Trinity. livefree.academy/Trinity. So that's something I've been really passionate about lately. We're getting it all set up ourselves.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You'll see the links in the descriptions wherever you're watching or listening to this. Those components you just outlined, interestingly, there are various models in the UK that are very compatible with what you've just shared. And a lot of people are now exploring those means of organization and setting up within their communities. And there's some really good examples across different co-ops that have emerged as well that have used some of those different tools. So definitely go check that out. That sounds fascinating. We'll look forward to hearing more about that and other things at the People's Reset. John, it's been amazing to hear your journey into where you are today. You know, how you've taken your fight through the political system and now really concentrated with full vigor on this exit and build strategy, the Freedom Cell Network, and the various different initiatives that have spawned from this. So incredible to learn from you and look forward to doing so again in September. So a final call to action to our audience at home. If you haven't yet booked your ticket, please do come and join us at thegreaterreset.org. You'll see all the details there about the event and all our amazing speakers. We've got 24 speakers, 24 different workshops, evening entertainment. WFX is joining us on the Saturday night for our People's Reset concert. So we're going to have a lot of fun as well. So do come and join us. And thanks again, John, for all the work you're doing. And thanks for being with us here today on the podcast.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate you. You're a great source of inspiration. I'm really excited that this event is going to be taking place in the UK. I think it's going to be really powerful.
Bang on. All right. See you in September in person.
This is a solutions event. This is what's happening.
After 5 successful events in North America, the Freedom Cell Network is partnering with Free Humanity to bring the People's Reset to Bath, UK.
The technocrats at the United Nations and the World Economic Forum are now hosting the Summit of the Future in New York City in September 2024.
Join us in September for the People's Reset UK, our summit for our future.
Over 3 days, we will gather in community, celebrating our victories and successes, whilst continuing to highlight solutions under 5 holistic themes.
Liberate your mind, body, and spirit.
Permaculture and food independence.
Building parallel networks.
Empowering technology.
And building free and conscious communities. 24 top-notch speakers, including Neil Oliver, Charles Dowding, Dan Astin-Gregory, Nigel Howlett, John and Rebecca Bush, and many more.
We'll also be hosting the People's Reset concert featuring international artist Dub FX, as well as Presence, 33, and more talented performers to come. Join us for the People's Reset UK. Visit thegreaterreset.org to learn more and to get your ticket today.